And I will be your master of ceremonies tonight. Second annual Dodge County Historical Society Ghost Story Festival. It is so great to see so many of you here. Thank you for coming. I wanted to let you know one of the most important things. There are refreshments for sale in the back. So if and when you need them, please feel free. Now, before we begin, I would like to ask how many of you have ever had any experiences with a ghost or two? Yeah, quite a few of you. All right. How many of you at least believe in ghosts, spirits, specters, or whatever you choose to call them? Yeah, me too. Tonight, we will feature 5 ghostly stories, fictional stories. And I will also be sharing some true experiences that happened right here in this building. Some of them are from members of the Historical Society Board, and some from visitors past and present. Some stories have turned skeptics into believers. So let's begin our program tonight with one of the Historical Society's board members, Kathy Barnett. You may have seen her practicing her garden expertise in many local gardens. She is known as the Cemetery Lady, having organized many cemetery tours. Please welcome Kathy Barnett.
Any kids here? Kids? Okay. All you kids, you want to hear a ghost story? Well, come on up then. Right up here. Come on, Melody. Come on, Olivia. Come on, guys. Just sit down up here. You can come in front of the orange line. You can get up nice and close. Okay. While they're making their way up here, this is a family lore story. It's been passed down through the generations. My mommy told it to me, therefore it is true, right? Right. And her mommy told it to her. And I don't know how many generations back this goes. So we're claiming that this really happened. Everybody up here? Did you guys know that on a Friday night like tonight, once upon a time, every single store downtown was open? And downtown was just hopping, busy with people. Couldn't find a place to park the car, couldn't find a place to walk down the sidewalk without running into somebody you knew. And all the farmers around would get their chores done early, clean up, grab a quick bite to eat, and they would come to town too, including Ma and Pa Miller. They were no exception. They came every Friday to do their shopping, but this particular Friday, it started to rain. So they decided, well, I guess we better head home. And going home for them meant going across the bridge out by the Supper Club on G towards Randolph. Help me, people. Bayside. Out by Bayside. There's cemeteries out there. Left, right, and sideways. There's St. Mike's, there's St. Mary's, there's First Lutheran, and that was the way they had to go to get home. So they're going past the cemetery when suddenly Ma grabs Pa's arm and says, "Look at that!" And they looked over there, and way in the back of the cemetery was a man, just standing there, completely still, in a real nice suit, no hat. Now listen, guys, men always wore hats back then. They'd go barefoot before they'd go bareheaded. So this was really unusual. And there he was, standing out there with no hat on in the pouring rain, and he was completely dry. Ma and Pa Miller made it home in record time. And they decided from then on that when they came to town on Fridays, they were going to leave before it got dark because they had to go past that cemetery. Well, they did pretty well at that, but a few months later, they'd run into quite a few friends while they were shopping, did a lot of visiting, and because of that, it was already dark when they got to the cemetery. So looking around rather nervously, Ma spotted a white orb. Now if you see a white round ball of light, that means there's a ghost, okay? So she saw this white orb at the far end of the cemetery just kind of bouncing around. When suddenly it veered and was zooming straight at them. Well, Ma's screaming and she's trying to climb into Pa's lap, and Ma was no small woman, by the way. And Pa's desperately trying to get the horse's nose out of the clover, and he's not having any success at all. And this orb keeps zooming straight at them, and it zips right in front of them and crosses the road. A big, round, white pig. A pig. Yes. Okay, you guys can go back to your seats now. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell the other folks here my personal experience with that cemetery. I'd had to chaperone my actress daughter. You want to stand up or you want to hide? To an afterglow because she was starring in a community theater production. But she was underage, so Mommy had to go along. And we were walking out to her car, and she's just chattering away and tossing her keys up in the air, and suddenly she comes to a screeching halt, and her keys hit the pavement. And I said, "What is your problem? Have you had too many kitty cocktails?" And she said, "Didn't you see him? He came running right out of the trees, straight at us. Not cool." No, I didn't see a thing. Here are some pointers that were given me on how to protect yourself against ghosts. If you see a ghost and are brave enough to walk around it 9 times, it will go away. Yeah, I don't think so. If you pass a haunted place at night, turn your pockets inside out and the ghost won't hurt you. What, they're pickpockets? They're after your money? They say a ghost will never approach a light left burning in a room at night. Now, this rumor is why people get scared and leave their lights on all night. Always carry a key, Stephanie, because you can always get rid of the ghost by throwing the key at it. That's what you were doing, right? Yeah, okay. Ringing bells and banging pots and pans will usually get rid of a ghost in a big hurry. It'll also get rid of the rest of your family and probably your neighbors. Thank you.
Our next storyteller is Patrick Lutz, president of the Historical Society. Now, because Patrick spends a lot of time volunteering at the museum, he's had numerous encounters here. He always feels a little uncomfortable in the old kitchen. One day, he was rummaging through various boxes looking for something. He came to an open box, and there, sitting on the very top, was a manuscript that had disappeared. Now, this may not sound so unusual, except it had disappeared many years prior, and he had done a thorough search of that room many times before. But there it was, sitting on top of the box. Other museum members have had other objects appear in plain sight after having been missing for extended periods of time as well. If you wonder if this could really happen, perhaps we should do a little research and look under G for ghosts. Tonight, he will be sharing his original story, Is That the House? Patrick?
Mary and Rob were rushed up to the front steps of Mr. O'Connell's house. He owned a lot of property in town. It was the Depression, 1930, and he was buying up houses that people lost because they defaulted on their loans. Many people had to rent their own homes from him after banks foreclosed. No one knew where he came from, and even fewer wanted to talk to him, and much less go to his house. But on this day, Mary, holding their new baby, and Robert knew they had to see him. They just couldn't live in that house for another minute. Robert pounded hard on the door. No answer. He pounded again. The door shade went up, and they heard the latch click open. Mr. O'Connell slowly opened the door and barked, "What do you folks want?" Mary was desperate. We just can't stay in that house. We have to find a new place to live." Mr. O'Connell showed no compassion. "Now hold your horses, lady. You only lived there 3 months. What could possibly be the matter?" Robert jumped in. "Well, we hear noises upstairs at night. We think that..." Mr. O'Connell raised his hand to stop Robert and calmly asked, "Well, just what kind of noises?" "I told you when I rented you that apartment that no one has lived up there for a long time, and I store all kinds of old stuff in those rooms. Plus, I just turned the radiators on. They make all kinds of noise, knocking and banging and hissing. Now just go home and forget about it." With that, Mr. O'Connell shut the door, and slowly the shade went down. Mary and Robert stood crestfallen. "Well, what are we going to do, Robert? I just can't live there." "We have nowhere to go, Mary. They had to go back to that house, the one that seemed too good to be true. Newly painted rooms, cheap rent, and even some furniture. It seemed perfect. But in the last week, everything changed. Each of the last 4 nights, they heard noises coming from upstairs. Each night it was the same. Footsteps, a squeaky board, and then the music. They never heard a thing during the day. The first night it happened, Robert walked outside to check to see if it might be coming from a neighbor's house. He listened, but there was nothing outside that matched the noises from upstairs. Those same noises they heard each night. After leaving Mr. O'Connell's, Robert took the baby from Mary and they started to walk home in silence. Robert could see that Mary was crying. He knew he had to say something. "I have an idea. Let's talk to the neighbors and see if anyone knows anything about our house. Maybe sound travels in some funny way in that neighborhood." Mary remained silent. As he continued to walk, Robert wondered, who would he ask? I could ask the old lady who lived next door, but she always tries to avoid us. When I try to talk to her, she hurries into her house and mumbles, "It was the flu. It was the flu." And I thought, the Spanish flu? Robert thought maybe a family member died from the Spanish flu and she was still troubled by it. On the other side was a bachelor who traveled all the time. He was never home. Finally, Mary broke the silence. "I guess we really don't have a choice. We have to stay there. There has to be some logical explanation. Maybe it is the furnace, like Mr. O'Connell said. It's a nice apartment. It's on the first floor. Let's try to make the best of it. I'll make something special for tonight." Robert hugged her, and with one arm cradled the baby, they walked down the street. As they approached their house, he noticed the neighbor's home. The bachelor whose car was parked on the street out front. It had the familiar lettering on the doors, "Watkins Home Remedies." They both laughed when Robert opened the front door and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Hello, we're home! Who's ever up there?" They went to bed that night and felt relieved that they had not heard a sound. The next morning, Robert sat on the front stoop and thought maybe it all had been a dream. But that night, the baby woke them up, cooing and giggling as if someone was tickling her. They both jumped out of bed. Robert noticed it was just after midnight. Mary smiled, held the baby, amazed. "That's strange. What does she see? Oh, and look, she's fallen right back to sleep." Then the noises upstairs returned. This time, it sounded playful, like tiny feet running from one end of the upstairs apartment to the other. It ended just as quickly as it started. They held the baby between them and just stood there for what seemed like forever, and then slowly crawled back into bed. The next morning, Robert was determined to get some answers. If the neighbor's car was still out front, he was going to talk to him as soon as he could. At exactly 8 a.m., he knocked on the door, hoping to gather some information and even make a new friend. Big Jim Quartermain swung open the door and said in a moving voice, the voice you would expect from a longtime salesman, "Well, what can I do for you, young fella?" Well, Robert knew he was talking way too fast, but didn't want to stop until he got his story told. Jim sort of stood up a little straighter and just stood there silently for a moment. Robert thought he was going to turn and walk back into his house and shut the door in his face. But instead he said, "My name's Jim Quartermain, and I'm not around that much, but I lived in this house a long time, and all I know is that an awful lot of young families, just like yours, have lived in that house over the years. Most never made it to Christmas. They move in during the summer, and then in the fall, they're gone. I don't know why. Something must have happened there. People used to walk by and say, is that the house? You should talk to Granny Twiggs. She might know." Well, Robert was glad to hear that other folks felt there was something strange about the house. On the other hand, it also made him even more anxious. Granny Twiggs? Yeah, she lives on the other side of your house, the one that's overgrown with vines. Well, she's a strange old bat, but she might have an answer. Some folks say she used to hold seances in her basement. You know, I've tried talking to her, but she hardly speaks. She just runs into her house when I come near. Well, she's all crippled up with arthritis, and that's why her hands are all stiff, like twigs on a tree. That's where she gets her name. You know, and the kids are always picking on her and throwing rocks at her house. Maybe she can help you. Just be nice to her. Well, we'll see you sometime." Robert turned slowly without saying goodbye. What would he tell Mary? He knew they would have to meet face to face with Granny Twiggs. Mary listened intently as Robert told her about the conversation with Big Jim. He had hardly finished his story when Mary blurted out, "Let's go see her right now." Robert was a little less anxious to walk over to her house, but Mary had already grabbed the baby and was headed out the door. Before he knew it, she was knocking on her door. They were shocked when Granny Twiggs opened the door and said, "I was wondering when you were going to come over to hear the story." Robert had never seen her up close, but noticed her long gray hair, wrinkled face, pointy nose, and knotted fingers. She did sort of look like a witch. "Please come and sit down." Mary thought the inside of her house was actually very nice. Granny must have noticed them both staring at everything. "Now, not what you expected. I leave the outside of kind of a mess. That way no one bothers me." Robert and Mary sat down with the baby. Mary couldn't wait any longer. "Who or what lives upstairs in our house?" Granny moved her chair a little closer to theirs. "You have to promise me not to say a word until I'm finished." They both nodded. "My husband and Mr. O'Connell went off to fight in France in the Great War. Neither came home. I lost a husband, and the late Mr. O'Connell left a wife named Agnes and a little boy named Tommy. That was in the summer of 1917. Poor Agnes and Tommy didn't have any money or a place to go. You're Mr. O'Connell, who owns the house where you live, but he's not a nice man." Granny continued talking. He had bought the house in August and fixed it up downstairs, but didn't do anything to the upstairs. Agnes and Tommy had no choice. They moved in. They cleaned it up the best they could, but it was dirty and it smelled like smoke. I even visited them once. They were happy to have a home, but old Mr. O'Connell told them they couldn't make any noise. He had a good renter downstairs and didn't want to lose them, so they could only whisper and never wear their shoes in the house. First of all, they could never play the radio. Then Granny Twiggs really got sad. She told the story very slowly and softly. Mary and Robert leaned forward so they could hear every word. Winter came early in 1917. The winds blew and the skies were gray every day. I knew it was an omen, but Agnes and Tommy could never have known what was going to happen to them. I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was late afternoon and the temperature was dropping. Mr. O'Connell drove up to your house in his rusty old car and went down to the root cellar. He was going to fire up the boiler. It took him a while because he'd never done it before. For this house, anyway. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a couple days later there was quite the commotion. I looked out the window and saw a policeman, a fire truck, and an ambulance all parked in the street. The fire chief was talking with Mr. O'Connell. There were people I hadn't seen for years milling around that house. I mind my own business. I didn't go out. Mary couldn't keep still. What happened? Granny continued. The front door opened, and two men from the neighborhood carried out a stretcher carried with a white sheet. Mr. O'Connell held the door open, while two men carried out the second body. I just knew it was Agnes and Tommy. The nice couple who lived downstairs were hugging each other and crying. They put the bodies in the ambulance and it drove off. People stood around for a few more minutes, sometimes pointing upstairs, then slowly walking away. The police chief talked with Mr. O'Connell for a few minutes and then left. He stood for a few moments, hanging his head, then stumbled and fell backwards onto the stoop. He sat for a minute, then walked toward my house. He rapped at my door. We just stood there. Neither of us could speak. Finally he said, "It was the furnace flue. It had a hole on it on the second floor. They died the same night I stoked the boiler. It was all my fault." As he walked away, he mumbled, "It was the flue. I would have let them live there forever." Surprisingly, Robert and Mary felt more relief than fear. At least they knew the story. They were living with troubled spirits. If they were going to stay there, they needed some advice. "Granny Twigs, what should we do?" Granny smiled. "All the others just moved out. They didn't take the time to know the story, but you cared. And that's the first step. Oh, and they like little babies. It's a new life. Spirits never bother a new baby." From that day on, every night, Robert and Mary said good night to their daughter and looked up at the ceiling and said, "Good night, Agnes. Good night, Tommy." They never heard noises again.
Thanks, Patrick. I think it might be time to share another one of those true life encounters from right here in the museum, speaking of things that go bump in the night. So we have some examples of unexplained sounds. First is the Big Bang. Now, on several occasions, big bangs can be heard. A common sound has come from upstairs, where the original library was. Naturally, it's the sound of a big book, like a dictionary, being dropped on the floor. The first time it happened, one of the volunteers was working here at night. She heard it and went upstairs thinking something might have fallen in one of the exhibits. Nothing had fallen. Everything was intact. Then, she heard it again. Well, she was so frightened, she ran out the door, leaving all the lights on and all the doors unlocked. That was the last time she worked here alone at night. Other sounds? Chains being dragged along the floor in the old furnace room. The sound of metal scraping near the antique car. And finally, the sound of ragtime music playing under the balcony in the corner. And how can we explain these creepy sounds? Well, perhaps we should do a little research and look under G for ghosts. Next, we have a Reader's Theater piece starring Jim McMillan and Gina Berg, based on the play by Lucille Fletcher, The Hitchhiker. Her name is Nan Adams. Her occupation is buyer at a New York department store. At present, she's on vacation, about to drive to California.
Don't worry, Dad. I'll be careful.
And now don't drive too fast or fall asleep or pick up any strangers on the road.
Of course course not. Come on, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore.
I know, but it's my job to worry about my little girl.
Oh, your little girl will be just fine.
Well, you call me as soon as you get to Hollywood?
Of course. Nothing's going to happen.
Well, it's raining pretty hard. I checked your tires. They look good, so they're...
Goodbye, Dad.
Excellent spirits. The drive ahead, even the loneliness of it, seemed like an adventure. It would be fun, she thought.
I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge that morning. Saw a strange little man leaning against the cables. He looked like he was waiting for someone. Then he just disappeared. From there, I was on to the Pulaski Skyway over the Jersey Flats. It was on the Pennsylvania Turnpike between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh that it started to rain again, harder than before. I could see a man standing there with his thumb out. Could it be the same man from the bridge? Fresh rain on his shoulders, carrying a cheap overnight bag, thin, with his cap pulled down over his eyes. He hailed me and stepped out into the highway. I swerved so I wouldn't hit him. Oh no!
Yeah. How fast were you going, miss?
I don't know. Going my way, he said?
Blowout, skid marks, shoulders like pudding, and going that fast. Lady, you're on the right side of Angels. By rights, you shouldn't have called a mechanic. You should have called a hearse.
But that man, that hitchhiker, going my way?
What man? I didn't see any man here. Let me fix you up with a new tire.
I was sure.
Are you all right, miss?
That hitchhiker.
Hitchhiker here? 265 miles long, there's practically no speed limit, and it's a straightaway. Now, who's going to stop to pick up a guy under those conditions?
Well, he's gone now. Guess he got picked up.
Probably.
It's funny, though. I just saw him just a little while ago on the Brooklyn Bridge and on the Turnpike.
You all right, Mix?
Yes. Well, thank you for your help.
It's okay. You have a safe trip.
That thing, that man, gradually passed from my mind. I had a good night's sleep in Pittsburgh and didn't think about him all day. Until just outside Zanesville, Ohio, I saw him again.
Hello. Going my way.
He started to walk toward me. He looked as if he had been waiting for hours. Fresh rain on his shoulders, just like before. He hailed me.
Hello. Going my way.
I sped away. I took a side road, hoping to lose him. Hour after hour went by. I knew I would see him again. I caught myself searching the side of the road, waiting for him to appear. It was dark, and then my engine stopped. I was in the middle of nowhere. Please, somebody help me!
What do you want?
I'm out of gas, just down the road.
Well, come back in the morning and I'll fix you up.
Please, I can't stay here all night.
Lady, it must be midnight.
No, please, don't shut the door. Listen, just a minute ago, there was a man standing right here, right beside this stand. A suspicious-looking man. I'm afraid.
What did he look like?
He was carrying a cheap overnight bag, wearing a hat pulled down over his eyes. Fresh rain on his shoulders.
Fresh rain? Lady, we haven't had rain in over a week now. I'm guessing there was no man. You've been taking a nip. That's what you've been doing. Go on, get going.
No, please. I think he's after me, please.
All right. I'll get you some gas if you'll get out of my hair.
Sane. What a stroke of luck. All alone, in the middle of nowhere and out of gas. And to somehow convince him.
Lady,
Who's that? Standing next to my car.
what are you doing out so late?
What?
You know you left your keys in the car?
Do you live around here?
No. I'm on my way back from leave. Back to my ship in San Diego.
That's where I'm headed. Want a ride? Oh, what did my dad say? Don't pick up any strangers along the way.
Are you kidding? Sure.
I'm not kidding. I will take you all the way to San Diego. Will you drive with me?
You've got yourself a rider. Oh boy, middle of the night. No cars, no nothing, and who do I meet? A lady. Looks like a movie star. Woo! Wait till I tell the guys on the ship and the boys back in Mississippi.
You hitchhike much?
Well, back and forth, mostly on leave. It's kind of tough in the open country. Trucks are all right, but not cars. Cars won't pick up hitchhikers at night.
Let me ask you this.
Okay?
Suppose I'm driving across the country, say at a nice steady pace,
Uh-huh.
45 miles per hour.
Okay?
Could a guy like you, just standing beside the road, waiting for a ride, beat me from town to town? I mean,
I
provided
don't know.
he got picked up every time in a car, doing 65 or 70 miles per hour?
I don't know. Maybe not. What's the difference? Hey, watch it. Slow down. You nearly drove off the road.
Oh, did you see that man?
Who?
You must have seen him. The one standing beside the road. He called out, "Going my way."
Honey, I didn't see anybody. There was nothing there. Are you trying to run us off the road or something?
The thin, kind of gray-looking man.
I didn't see nobody. Nothing.
Oh, I saw him. Oh, there he is again. See him?
Going my way.
Look, lady. Maybe you better let me drive, huh?
Oh, you must have seen him that time.
I didn't see anybody. Hey! What are you trying to do?
I'm trying to hit him. I thought maybe I could kill him and make him stop following me.
That's it. I'm getting out of this car.
Where are you going?
Anywhere that puts me between this car and you.
Oh, please don't go. Look, I know you think I'm out of my mind, but this man has been following me across the country. Just stay with me until we reach the coast.
Now you listen, honey. What you need is a good night's sleep. I'll see you around.
No, don't go. I'm outside of a diner near Gallup, New Mexico. There's a payphone inside, and I'm going to call home, back to New York. Put in a call to my dad. Someone to bring back reality to me. Just a voice of a loved one.
This is the Adams residence. Whom do you wish to speak to?
Who is this?
Why, this is Dr. Whitney.
I don't know any Dr. Whitney. Where's my dad? Where's Mr. Adams?
Why, he's still unable to come to the phone. Nervous breakdown. I'm sorry, who is calling anyway?
What do you mean? There's nothing the matter with my dad.
Well, it's all taken place since the death of his daughter, Nan.
What? That's me. He's talking about me. What do you mean? The death of his daughter?
Nan. She was killed just 6 days ago in an automobile accident in Pennsylvania. Tire blew out and her car turned over. Now, who's this calling? What's the meaning of all this? Who's this calling?
And so, I'm sitting here in a deserted car park in Tucson, Arizona, trying to get a hold of myself. Keep moving is the best thing to do. I start my car, look in my rearview mirror, and there he is, staring at me.
Going my way. guess you might say our hitchhiker was pretty sneaky, lurking in the shadows. Just like the ones here in the museum. You never know when they might appear. Now, there are a lot of examples from people working in the museum, day or night. Many times, a woman dressed in a long dress has been keeping an eye on the place. But when they look at her, she vanishes. But perhaps the most interesting ones comes from visitors to the museum. Just a few months ago, the museum hosted a guest speaker whose topic was Native Americans. The speaker was positioned just in front of the balcony. After his presentation, one of the audience members who had never been to the museum approached the curator and asked if he noticed a person under the balcony. Another member of the audience overheard the conversation and confirmed she had also seen the shadowy figure. Who are these shadowy residents? Well, perhaps we should do a little research and look under G for ghosts. Moving right along. Jessica Schultz may look familiar to you if you've been to Old World, Wisconsin, where she shares ghost stories. Or you may remember her from last year's festival. She's back with a new story, The Bookshelf Ghost. Please welcome Jessica Schultz.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be back here to share a ghost story with you. Before I begin, I just want to let you know that the story that I got is from a book called A Storyteller's Collection of Ghosts of Wisconsin Ghost Stories by Elizabeth Matson and Stuart Stotts. I took the story from there and I added some things and I changed some things. They had it right in there that I could, so I did. So here we go, The Bookcase Ghost. Did you know that the building behind us used to be a library? And did you know that one of the librarians used to live inside the building? Her name was Hattie Doolittle. She worked there and lived there for like 50 years, and when she died, she never left. Ooh, isn't that exciting? I would love to be the first to talk to her. My name is Marion. I'm a librarian. I don't have a Harold Hill, but I love ghost stories and I love books. But wouldn't it be fascinating to be the first to talk to a ghost? Except there are plenty of people that say you probably shouldn't talk to a ghost. And one of them was my great-grandfather Charles. Before Charles moved out here to Wisconsin with his family, he went on ahead of them to find a suitable homestead. He gets to a certain town near nighttime, and he's looking for a place to stay, except every hotel in the town is filled up with travelers. He's looking and looking, and he's about ready to camp on his wagon for the night, when lo and behold, at the edge of town, he sees a beautifully dilapidated, weather-beaten hotel with just one room left. Well, he asked no questions. He took it right away. And before he was even on the pillow, he was asleep. But then at midnight, he wakes up. One moment he's asleep, and the next moment, he's wide awake as if someone had called his name, or he had heard someone drop something from outside or in the room. But he sees nothing that could have made him wake up the way he did. So he just lies awake in his bed for a while, looking at the tree outside his window, watching the shadows of the tree play in the moonlight on the wall. Except, he realized that there was no tree outside of his window, and those weren't shadows playing on the wall. It was a shape. It was a form. over there by the bookcase that he had barely noticed when he flung himself into bed just hours before. It was a person, a woman. Charles could see her shape clearly now, her long dress and flowing skirts. She was moving rhythmically, purposefully. She was taking the books off the bookcase and piling them on the floor, one by one. By one. By one. And then, when all of the books were off of the bookcase, she started putting them back on the bookcase. One by one by one. And once, the very instant, all the books were back on the bookcase, she disappeared, melted into the shadows as if she had never been there. Charles could not believe what he had seen. He knew he had seen her, but it was such a strange thing to do. Take the books off the bookcase and then just put them back on again without even looking through them? Charles was curious. He was so curious that the very next day he wandered around town, and every person he met he asked if they'd known about the ghost and why she haunted as she did. He met plenty of people that said, yes, we've heard of the ghost. But then they'd suddenly get very busy and decline to answer any other of his questions. So he keeps looking. And finally, when it's dark outside, he gets to someone who's going to tell him more than just, yes, I've seen the ghost. It was an old-timer. He said, yeah, I've heard of the ghost. She's been there for years. Most everybody that sleeps in that room sees her. Spooks most people, so now the room is hardly ever rented anymore. But who is she? Why does she haunt the room? Why does she take the books off the bookcase and just put them back on the bookcase again? Well, that I can't rightly tell you. I don't know. But the one thing I can tell you is this. Don't, whatever else you do, talk to her. It will be the worse for you. Well, since it was nighttime, Charles had wasted the entire day asking people about this ghost woman he'd seen. He had spent no time looking for a homestead for his family. So he went back to the same rundown, weather-beaten hotel, to the same room, and just like the night before, he was asleep before his head even hit the pillow. And just like the night before, around midnight, he wakes up as if he had heard someone calling his name. And he looks over to the bookshelf, and there she is again, taking the books off the bookcase one by one by one. The longer Charles watches her, the more intrigued he becomes, and the more frustrated he becomes. He had spent the entire day trying to find out something about this woman, and he had learned nothing. But there she stood with all the answers, taking the books off the shelf and piling them on the floor one by one by one. Charles was so close to just asking her all his questions. But then he remembered what the old-timer said about not talking to her. So he kept his mouth shut and watched her as she began putting the books back on the bookcase. One by one, by one. Do you know how it is when someone tells you not to do something and you just itch to do it? Yeah, that's how it was with Charles. The longer he sat there, he began to wonder, why couldn't he talk to her? And what would happen if he did? The woman was putting the books back on the bookcase. One. By one. Wait! Who are you? What are you doing here? And why are you putting those books back on the bookcase? The woman turns to look at Charles, and for the first time he can see her features. Before, they had been covered by a scarf or a shawl, but the shawl fell away, and he saw her beautiful face. She had bright blue eyes, rosy lips, long, glossy black hair. Charles was mesmerized. But the very moment the shawl hit the floor, her skin began to melt and dissolve. It ran in rivers down her bones and pooled at the floor by her feet. Her eyes popped out of their sockets, bounced on the floor, and rolled around like marbles, and her glossy black hair blew out in chunks, flying around the room. All that was left was a grinning skeleton with two big black holes for eyes. In 1 second, she was by the bed. The next second, she took her bony thumbs and was pressing them on Charles's forehead, pressing him down, down, down into the feather pillow. And then he saw nothing. When Charles woke up, he was gasping and coughing. Feathers were flying out of his mouth. They were flying above his head and his ears. And he had the most tremendous headache. He stumbled out of bed over to the washstand by the wall to splash some water in his face and get rid of this nasty headache. And then he saw that in the middle of his forehead were two big red welts from the skeleton lady's fingers. They never went away. He had those scars for the rest of his life. My mother showed me pictures of him. Ugh, looked terrible. And apparently every time someone asked him what had happened, he would tell them this story, and then he would end it by saying that ever since that day, he'd known better than to ask personal questions of people that would rather keep their secrets to themselves. So, when I think of talking to Hattie, I think of this story. But I really, really, really want to talk to her. But, I don't know. Yeah, I think I better bring a helmet.
So, as Jessica just told you, this magnificent edifice was originally a library. And this next example is a perfect follow-up to her story because it takes place behind the original library desk, and it turned a non-believer into a believer. Okay, folks. So, this is Beaver Dam, and we must have a story that involves a beaver. And a bouncing beaver, no less. So, one of the volunteer board members was working one afternoon. A visitor asked to purchase one of the stuffed animals. A beaver, of course, from the gift shop. He sold the beaver that was sitting on the shelf to the woman, and then replaced it with another beaver, placing it on the shelf behind him. He turned back around, and the beaver flew off the shelf and hit him in the back. Skeptics will say it simply fell and landed on him. But physics don't lie. He tried several times to make the same thing happen. But the trajectory and his height made that impossible. And here's the craziest part. The security camera cut out right before the beaver went flying off the shelf, and it came back on right after. Perhaps we should do a little research and look under G for ghosts. Well, speaking of buying things, we do have those refreshments available in the back, so remember, feel free to help yourselves. Because we are on our way to our final story. And before we hear our final story, we would like to thank some of the folks who are helping us make this evening happen. So thank you to the Board of Directors for the Dodge County Historical Society. Museum Curator Kurt Sampson. Scott Epperly on sound. All our performers. Diane Lutz. Beaver Dam Area Community Theater. Good Karma Broadcasting. And Terry Peterson. So for our final story, I would like to introduce Jennifer Boleg, Kevin Cushing, Mario David, Joe Orvik, Tina Swain, and Gary Torek. This, yes, please. This is a variation of many similar stories by various authors like Maria Leach and Leonard Ross. Our story, by Montgomery Pittman, is like all the others. It involves a dare and a trip to the cemetery. The grave.
Look out! Here he comes! Unloading! He's back! It's Pinto!
Don't you fret, Miss Tina. We've got a plan.
But I'm scared. I'm a scared of Pinto.
We're all scared. Born and raised here I was, and I ain't never met a soul who wasn't scared.
I said we've got a plan, and it sure as heck had better work.
Okay, boys, let's do this.
Not me. I don't believe in gunfire.
It's now or never. Let's go.
Pinto, you're covered on all sides. Raise your hands.
With that, a barrage of gunfire let loose, dropping Pinto to the ground. Slowly, they approached the evil that lay there in the dust.
Well, we've done it. We shot him down.
Oh no, he's still alive.
Let's get him into the old jail.
I never thought we'd get him. Not Pinto Sykes. Not that easy.
You go fetch his pa and his sister.
All right.
Yes, sir, that's the end of that.
Normally, the old man would be correct. This would be the end of the story. We've had the traditional shootout on the street, and the bad man will soon be dead. But some men of legend and folktale have been known to continue having their way even after death. The outlaw and the killer, Pinto Sykes, was such a person. And shortly, we'll see how his ghost continues to haunt the town, and a man named Connie Miller in particular.
Who's that?
It's me, Connie, Miss Tina. Why'd they fence off that piece of the street down there?
It's his blood. You could see down underneath all that dust. You could see his blood down there.
Whose blood?
Pinto Sykes. They shot and killed him the day before yesterday.
Well, well, looky what the wind blowed in. Hello, Connie.
Joe,
Did you notice our little fence out in the street, Connie?
that I did. And I know what's in it, too. The blood of Pinto Sykes. Who shot him? Who is we?
For us, the whole town.
Not me. I don't believe in gunfire.
Only 8 of us actually fired.
But the whole town was behind it.
Well, you must admit, the whole town ain't much of a marksman. Out of the 8 shots fired, only one of them hit him.
Now, Miss Tina, at least we got him. Bullet passed right through him.
No one's bragging that they done it. No, sir. No one's taking the credit for that thar piece of gunplay.
You know something? I reckon Pinto knows who killed him.
Well, reckon you've had some disappointed, Connie, being as how you spent so much time trying to find him yourself.
That I am. 4 months wasted looking for him, and I could have found him right here.
That ain't the way Pinto tells it. He claims you didn't even try to catch up to
Well,
him.
hello, Johnny Rob. Still as big a blabbermouth as ever, I find.
Well, you do spout off a lot, Johnny Rob.
No need to get riled, Connie. Us here ain't saying that you didn't actually try to catch him. But the fact is that Pinto claimed that on his deathbed.
He talked before he died.
He lived half an hour after he was shot. Talked to Blue Streak right up to the very end.
What did he say about me?
I reckon Connie deserves to hear it all.
We got a new circuit judge here, Connie. A young fellow named Ed Thackeray. He was through here last week, and we went to him with our complaints.
We told him how one Pinto Sykes is wanted by law in 3 states, but treats this town like it was his personal property.
Just because he was born and raised here. And we tell how we hired you, Connie Miller, to track him down. But we ain't had much results.
Well, sir, this here Thackeray, he gets mad at us and tells us to grow up like men or else leave town and move to where other men can protect us.
Well, he gets us kind of fired up. So we hold a meeting, and we all agree to work as one. The next time Pinto rode in, we'd all join in, and we'd take him.
Now, day before yesterday, he rides in.
He rode in. 8 of the town gunned him down out in the street. That's all there is.
No, that ain't all there is.
All right. You tell it.
We sent for his pa, Dan Sykes, and for his sister, Janet.
He knows the names of his family. He was born here, too.
He spent the last few minutes talking to them. He told his pa how sorry he was that he hadn't turned out any better, and he told his sister Janet how he wished she'd marry a fine man and move away. Has to be buried near his ma.
Well, only 20 feet away. Is she true a woman to have the likes of him any nearer?
What did he say about me?
He got real riled up when we mentioned you. He said the slower he ran away, the slower you chased him.
He said he waited for you in Dodge. He even sent word he was where he was. You never showed up.
He said you ought to be able to catch him by now, but that if you ever come anywhere as close to his grave, he'll reach out and he'll grab you.
He lied, even on his deathbed. I searched all over Dodge. Every saloon, hotel. He wasn't even in town long enough to rent himself a room.
Who's there? Oh, hello, Jenny.
Give me a bottle of rye, Joe.
Seems your paw is hitting the drinking mighty heavy. Maybe you ought to try to get him to tone it down.
He's a fine man. Now the folks here in town, they're not holding it against him just 'cause he's Pinto's paw.
This ain't for my paw, it's for me. Well, look what the wind blew in.
Hello, Jenny. How are you?
Fine, just fine. How's yourself?
Just tolerable.
You know, my brother and I were just talking about you.
Just the day before yesterday. He's real sorry he's been missing you.
Oh, we told him, Jenny. Even about how Pinto's gonna grab him.
Oh, we told him that, too.
You've been chasing him for so long, Connie. You ought to feel lucky tonight. You know right where he is. All you gotta do is walk out there. Isn't that nice? Tell me something, Connie. Are you afraid of Pinto's grave?
The rest of us are. Now, how about you? Are you afraid?
No, I was never afraid of Pinto when he was alive, and I sure ain't afraid of him now that he's dead.
I don't believe that. Hey, put that gun away. I ain't armed.
Hold it, Connie. Let's not have any
Nobody
bloodshed.
calls me a coward.
Now, you didn't let me finish what I was saying, Connie. I don't think you're a coward. Leastwise, I don't think you're afraid of anybody in this room. Especially not me. I'm just a poor old boy. Work hard for not too much. But dogs and kids like me.
They follow him around all the time. Ooh, sure is windy tonight, ain't it?
No, sir. There's nobody afraid of me. And whether you were afraid of Pinto when he was alive, only you know that. And I was gonna say is, I bet you won't call on Pinto tonight.
Why don't you shut up before I decide to hurt you?
It's almost midnight. Now, I'll bet you won't walk out here at midnight sharp and visit Pinto's grave. I got a $20 gold piece it took me 20 weeks to save. Now you won't do what I just said.
I'm gonna tell you something, boy. I don't like you. Never have, and I never will.
So old Blabbermouth got himself a $20 gold piece, huh? Well, I just happen to have one too. And it'll just cover yourn.
One of us will have $40 instead of 20.
That's right. And when I get back, I don't want to see you hanging around here where I can see you. You understand?
Connie, you don't want to put up another 20, do ya?
Are you saying you want to bet against me too?
Betting's my business, Connie.
You don't think I got the nerve.
I didn't say that. I just said I bet $20 you don't go. There's 20 more dollars.
Keep an eye on the bets, Miss Tina.
You sure you want to go?
How come now you think I'm afraid?
Because we'd be afraid. We know you can draw your gun real fast, Connie. But out in the graveyard, that gun won't be worth a copper cent.
I don't get my nerve from this gun. I had it long before I could pick one of them up.
Connie, before you go, you got to work out a little detail. Since you're doing this job by yourself, how will we be sure that you've done it?
What do you mean?
What's to keep you from going to the edge of the graveyard and then telling us you went all the way?
You saying you don't trust me?
Business is business, Connie. Take this Bowie knife, and when you reach your destination, simply stick it into the grave. Then a day like tomorrow, we'll see some proof of your visit. If we see it within 5 feet of the fresh earth, we'll concede the wager.
One thing, Connie. Won't nobody go up there and steal that knife once you planted it?
Keep the bottle on the bar. I won't be long.
Hello, Connie.
Hello, Jenny.
Going to see Pinto?
Maybe.
You're braver than I thought. Here, maybe a good belt of red eye'll make it easier.
I don't get my nerve out of no bottle, Jenny.
You go on up there and see Pinto. I just came there from... He's waiting for you.
I don't understand it. It's morning and he ain't back yet.
Maybe he didn't have the nerve to come back and face us when he didn't have the nerve to do it.
Not likely. His horse is still here. I just can't help but feeling that somehow I got a man killed.
Now it's full daylight and we can all think with clear heads. Deep down, we all know that the dead can't really hurt nobody.
La 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 la. Morning.
Morning, Jenny. What are you doing with that plate?
This is his. He used to eat out of it when he was a little boy. I'm gonna go put it on his grave.
I'll go with you. I gotta see what happened out there.
Well, I reckon we can't spend our days being afraid of a dead man. I'll come with you.
Come on, now, go on, get out of here.
I knowed it. I knowed it. I got a man killed.
Cut it out. You're acting like a baby. It's not your fault, boy.
What do you mean? What happened?
The whole story is right there. Well, look at him. He came up here, had more courage than I thought.
There's his knee prints. He knelt by the grave. He pulled his knife from his belt and plunged it into the grave. But the wind was strong, and it blew his coat over the grave.
Being dark, he didn't notice he put his knife through his own coat tail, pinning it to the grave.
Then he started to rise. As he did so, perhaps about halfway up, he felt a sudden tug. The knife holding his coat tail.
Pinto reached out and grabbed him.
He just thought it was Pinto. He was already scared to death.
And that finished him. His heart gave away, that's all.
So you think Connie's death was an accident? That he stuck the knife into his own coattail?
Yes, ma'am.
How did his coattail get over the grave?
Well, the wind must have blown it.
Huh. What direction was the wind from last night?
The south. Why?
The south. The same as right now? Look at my cloak. I'm standing in the same spot Connie was. Look at my cloak. Is the wind blowing it across the grave? No!
All right, folks. That will conclude our festivities. So how about one more big round of applause for everyone tonight? Thank you so much for coming. And if you liked these ghost stories, I'm sure you can find a little more if you do some research. Maybe